Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode and we're going to discuss about tech, startup and innovations. We have different professors, think tank, business organizations, representatives, even some of the guests also join today's sessions. We have Professor Donalds, we have Professor Edward, Professor David, and Mr. Jem Eid from Eid Foundations. So I want to start from Professor Donald uh, that how you want to introduce this point like tech startup and innovations even in covid-19 periods. There are many challenges, but they still the youth community they are taking these challenges, they are developing different kind of startup and based on their innovations and creativity. How do you want to introduce these things and what type of solution you have in your mind?
I am a big proponent, as you know, of startups and innovation. And one of the things that I think is important in history is that over time, every time there's a new innovation, Cassandras go running around saying, oh my God, everybody's going to be out of work. The world's going to come to an end. What are people going to do? And what happens is that people invent things that you would never expect. I mean, there was some degree of being able to expect the internet. There was Vannevar Bush and people like that were writing about the concept all the way back in the 40s. But technically it wasn't possible. And the actual shape it took was something that they didn't predict. It's hard to even look around right now and think of the idea that there was no internet at one time. I first started working over the internet, actually, the precursor of the internet in 1978, and which is probably before a lot of the audience was born. And but I had a vague idea of some of the things that were possible to happen, but I didn't invent any of them and get funded in time to get rich off of it. I wish I had. I got the domain name shoppingmall.com. I was actually believing that the internet was going to be commercialized, and people say, well, everybody thinks they're kind of the first, and I say, well, I got the domain name shoppingmall.com, and they say, okay, well, that's definitely shows you were at the bleeding edge. But what I'm really trying, but people got the idea of online stores. There was the dot-com boom. There was these various kinds of things. People got it, but it turned out to be a complicated problem of logistics and a lot of other things to get somebody like Jeff Bezos to get all the pieces in the right place. I think that one thing that's really, really, really important to understand is that to be successful is a matter of not what you do or what your ideas are, but where you are and the relationships that you develop to help. Because I was so into computer, I was just like, I just would love to have had a computer back when you built them out of heat kits. But I didn't have enough money to buy the stuff. But Wozniak and Jobs lived in a place where people would just give it to them. There were spare parts that they could use to put together. I have a friend who was actually probably, in a way, the first employee of Apple. His name is Dan Kotke, and he's been a friend forever. And he built the Apple I back in the garage with Steve's sister and Wozniak. They soldered them together, and that was just, he was in the right place at the right time. So what I'm trying to say is that with COVID, there's a big idea that people can work from home. Okay, you can just work from home, and everybody can just do everything over the internet. But the research I've done in social networks, in human social networks, relational networks of people, we find that innovation takes place at places where there's confluences of different social worlds. And that what I'm saying about that is what makes Silicon Valley so great is, besides the venture capital, I mean, these are critically important, Stanford and Berkeley and all the kinds of things, the resources, the human capital that it has, and financial capital and the know-how of the law firms and things like that. Besides that, there's people from everywhere. Like you could probably sit down in a restaurant in Palo Alto and lots of parts of San Francisco, I mean, the whole Bay Area, and find somebody in the restaurant who could help you develop a marketing channel to China. Just right in the restaurant. You call up and say, I need a marketing channel. And somebody raise their hand and you have a business. So as you can get COVID vaccines and things like that, don't believe the idea that you can just have an idea and use the internet to make it happen. It's possible, but that's not the way it happens. You need to be in some place where you can hear people talking about what's happening, what their problems are. I mean, I know the new technologies that are coming because I go to pitch contests and I can see these kids coming up with ideas that I never even could believe. And they're just doing one after another. So put yourself someplace where you can be part of the excitement of things happening. So that's the advice I would give.
Thank you, Professor Donald. We have Dr. Eric Dew from Silicon Valley, as well as we have our new guest, Mr. Shakel. So how are you today?
Oh, well, good morning, everybody.
Yes. Thank you.
Well.
Professor Edward, how do you want to introduce this point, especially startup and innovation, with our audience?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. And Donald's points are right on the mark. I'd recommend anyone who's interested in the history to take a look at Isaacson's book, The Innovators, which does a very good job of reviewing exactly how we got to the point where we're having this wonderful conversation with people in every time zone in the world. So I really suggest that book if you're interested in the history. But I'll make a few points about this. First of all, I think it is very important to understand that the innovators, and these are, of course, the people who are working with putting together startups, they are usually the people who have this idea that everyone thinks is nuts or hasn't thought about. Again, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak working in their garage. Or I've got pictures of Jeff Bezos with this little metal desk in this, office that has nothing in it but papers. And I even talked to Bezos one time, and he was talking about how he would put stuff in his car and drive it to the post office himself. There was another fellow I knew who was at Yale, and he did a business proposal. I think this is in the this was in the 70s, I believe. And he suggested some kind of an express delivery service. This is, I think, in the late 70s. He did his the paper, and his professor didn't think it was a very good idea. I think he only got a C on the paper. And that gentleman's name was Frederick Smith, and he founded FedEx. And again, everyone said, come on. His professor gave him a bad mark for his paper. And guess what? He's one of the richest people in the world. And does anyone know the name of that professor? I suspect not. I certainly don't. So the point is this. I say to innovators several things. First of all, start people who want to do startups. Think outside the box. Be innovative. Think of crazy ideas. Now, you probably will have to have challenges. There are going to be things where you say, well, this didn't quite work. This didn't quite work. I need to do a little bit more of this. You'll fail forward. The failure is not a problem in one sense. Thomas Edison tried supposedly 6,000 filaments before he found one that worked in the light bulb. And he didn't consider those failures. He considered those successes in discovering what didn't work. That was his mindset. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to be putting together a startup, that should be the mindset you have. If for anyone interested in, by the way, more information, one of the things I maintain is that we, on this conversation, those of you who are listening to this, who are optimistic, who see that the world can be better and should be better, and that you can prosper in this world, need to spread this vision. and this optimism. In the United States today, there is so much pessimism, there's so much nihilism and purposelessness and anger. And you see it in other countries. And obviously COVID has made this far worse. I'm proposing, and you can see on my website, the Human Achievement Alliance, I'm proposing October 21st, the day Edison invented the first workable light bulb, as Human Achievement Day. A day where all of those who are visionaries, who want to do startups, who want to expand the business they already have, who want to do good charitable work, I do a lot of that myself, that you all look and say, let's celebrate the wonderful world we have today. Let's ask questions about where did it come from? How did we get here? How did some cultures progress and others not progress? And we all learn from each other. And this is the final point I'll make. Look at the policies in your respective countries that either encourage startup businesses or discourage them. If you look at the Index of Economic Freedom, it was an idea I had when I worked at the Heritage Foundation in the late 1980s. And you can go online and look at Index of Economic Freedom and see where your various countries fall. And you can see a very strong correlation between Singapore, for example, which has a very free economy and does very, very well, and some of the other countries that don't do quite as well. So take a look at that and be cognizant of the fact that we need institutions that allow innovation. One of the things I'm worried about, and perhaps we'll get into this with a later discussion, especially with our friends here in Silicon Valley, is I've talked to a number of people who work out there, and if you look at Kai-Fu Lee's book, AI Superpowers, there's a lot of concern that Silicon Valley is becoming kind of conservative and staid, and that the innovation is dying. Part of it is because of public policies that kind of drive out the middle class because it's very costly and all, but it's important to always reinvent ourselves. So those are my thoughts, and I hope this is useful, and look forward to my colleagues here who have much more knowledge about these things than I do. So I'm going to learn here myself.
Thank you, Professor Edwards. Professor David Schumacher, how do you want to introduce these innovations as well as tech startup? We have many experts from around the world. I think even we have friends from Kashmir, from India, from Silicon Valley, from USA, and I'm from Malaysia. So hopefully we can share many interesting points. So Professor David, how do you want to introduce your opinions on tech startup as well as innovation?
Well, I'll try to keep this introduction under an hour. Innovation is something that draws me. I actually serve as Director of Applied Innovation for the United States Transhumanist Party. And in the chat, Sharif, I put in a link to that if you're interested in sharing that. My goal there is to just make people aware that the future is going to be different and the future is going to be better. And it's innovators and entrepreneurs are going to be the ones that are going to make it different and better. Going back to what Edward said about the current sentiment in the United States, I see a form of status quo bias where everything is the same as it is now and it will always be that way, and we're stuck. And that is historically untrue, and there's no reason to believe that history won't continue to evolve along a more positive line. I can provide some references for that for anyone that feels challenged by that idea. But innovation in the 21st century means working alongside innovations and things that we've talked about previously in this show. We had a show not too long ago about AI and robotics, for example. And people get discouraged over the fact that robots are going to take all the jobs and that AI is going to work us out of creative positions. And I agree that things will be different, but going back to my theme that things will be better, is what I propose is looking at a symbiotic relationship, if you will, between robots doing the work, AI doing implementation, but I believe that it takes the human mind to be the creative spark to make all these things happen. So we are part of the equation. We are not grounded out by the equation. So we need humans to be able to create, develop, make the plans for implementation, but we also need them to be the ones to decide what is there a market for? And I don't necessarily mean market just in dollars and cents, but there's an intellectual market, there's an emotional market. There are many different aspects to market. Humans, I believe, will be at the center of that, deciding what is advantageous and what goes forward, and AI and robotics, for example, will be partners. We will also partner with things that we're not even aware of today. Mm-hmm. So part of my job with the Transhumanist Party is to show people the best I can as I speak, as I write, as I blog, that things will be different and things will be better, and there is plenty of room for optimism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. We have our friend from Kashmir, Dr. Babur Afzal. He is really famous for his work, especially he's doing sustainabilities and many interesting things from Kashmir. I think he also from Silicon Valley, then he moved to Kashmir. So how do you want to introduce your point on innovations and how you, I love to personally love to know more about your projects because it's really interesting. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sharif, and really, really excited to see such a powerful gathering today. I'm from Jammu and Kashmir, which is the northern part of India, almost at the foothills of Himalayas. You know, in the context of Himalayas, a lot of good and bad things happen here. As we all know, the size of Himalayas is so big that any erratic change in climate cycles, you see a great impact in this region. So I am from Himalayas, and a little background of myself. I am a techie who quit the Silicon Valley career and chose to become a shepherd. I herd goats, and I've been doing that for almost 8 years now. And the reason that this happened was that I read one news that 25,000 goats died of starvation in Himalayas, and on the extreme edge of Himalayas, almost where the India and China border are. I had never visited that place ever in my life, but when I read that news, I was practically handicapped. I didn't know what to do, and I made a couple of phone calls that time to know is anyone aware of such a big tragedy. But unfortunately, people who were close in that proximity were also not very, the tragedy was not such a big shock for me than the response of people who were close to that ecosystem. The response was actually discouraging, and I realized that something has happened in society. We've become we've become plastic in many ways ourselves, and we're not responding. I decided to go and visit the spot where this tragedy had happened, and because it was on the extreme, it was all, it is at a place which is 15,000 feet above sea level, and temperatures go below -40 in that region, and there is no accessible road where this had happened. So I joined a group of nomads, and it took me 3 months by foot to reach there. And in those 3 months, so many things happened internally inside me that by the time I reached that spot, I had already decided that I'm not going back. And it has been, from that day, it is almost 8 years now. I did not return. And in this journey, a lot of close encounters with the realities of life and what is going on there. So what happened is that there's an industry called the Kashmir industry, as a lot of people would know. Kashmir, which is sold as scarves around the world. So there is something called Pashmina. So Pashmina is the finest form of Kashmir, which comes from this delicate goat. And this goat is, the goat is happy in that terrain 15,000 feet above that, and where temperatures go below 40, minus 40, the goat is very happy. And there is a particular community of nomads which is physically acclimatized to be in that terrain without oxygen. Now, what is happening is that because so much is happening there, so this community is under depression, forced migration happening because of erratic climate cycles, and a lot of things like that. And plus, over and above that, there's a lot of geopolitics. There's political unrest in this part of the country for almost 3 decades now. I entered this ecosystem practically with no background, only with one emotion. And many of the times I communicate that we should never underestimate the power of our emotion, because you don't know where it leads you. And in the past 8 years, it so happened that I became a shepherd. I've been herding goats, and because of my background, I got to be termed as a activist for this community who's highlighting issues linked to this ecosystem. So I became a activist, and and then I found myself in a very almost in a crazy spot. Why? Because I had no plan what to do. I am a shepherd myself. I'm a nomad myself, and on one side there's a community which is 1 million strong here, which looks at me with hope. Now, which puts me in a very awkward position. So initially, what I did, I talk about innovation in this context of my story. Initially, the only objective I had was to find ways to get the people who are in power positions, people who understand this ecosystem better than me, and who have some kind of influence, should know what is happening here, and my job is done. I kept doing that, and every attempt was a very powerful attempt as far as I was concerned. I did because no background, no connection with this ecosystem, and it's been 8 years. Every attempt I made, it appeared that I have done it. I've really done something big, and a lot of people came and even shook hands with me that, yeah, this is it. I mean, we got to know, thank you so much, so we'll do something. And soon after, I realized that practically nothing happened, pushing me back to where I started, that I think I missed something and now I should do something more. And the next shot will be more powerful. Next shot would be even far more powerful. And it so happened that from where I started, from a very weak position, to being invited by the presidents of India, to former presidents of India, I reached that level, and a lot of support came from different parts of the world also. But then what I was experiencing, and on the other side, what I wanted to do, I realized that there's a big gap. It's not happening, and again pushing me to think something new. And 8 years, I mean, it's been a roller coaster ride, a bunch of failures. Even today, then I sit and go onto the board, figuring out how will I do it. And now fortunately, there's a lot of good things happening, meaning that I've realized that the way there's a shift. You talk about artificial intelligence, you talk about so many interesting and beautiful technologies which are taking over the world. And if we realize that what I believe, from the startup ecosystem, what I realize is you really do not need armies to solve big problems. All you need is a good understanding of technology. I have quoted many times. Look at the number of times we visit the bank. In India, almost every transaction is happening through the ATMs, and now the shift is happening on digital currencies, which will very soon make banks irrelevant. Right? Banks will become irrelevant. Talk about technologies like blockchain, where we know the shift is happening in such a manner that very soon, and it's not far, governments will become irrelevant. So, for the reason why we go in that zone, and why we look at technologies, and why technologies can play a major role for people who are weak, without a background, a technology can make me so powerful in terms of structuring a solution that it can really give a big shift in the way people look at an ecosystem. It can only a good understanding of any technology. You talk about AI, you talk about blockchain, you talk about machine learning. These technologies, if understood well, can break monopolies. Now I'm talking about an ecosystem which is 1 million strong, people directly or indirectly linked to an ecosystem. So what I've realized in my journey is that there are practically three C's which I talk about. One is the creativity, and the creativity aspect that could be a combination of your technology, your left or right brain, I would say, if you can activate that part. Yes, left and right brain. And then you have to figure out ways of co-creation, collaboration. I think your individual journey cannot take you far. The world is all about collaborations, and if you can do that, which is the second C, I think you really do not need anyone. Borders are porous. You really do not have to be physically present. Teams can work from any part of the world. And interestingly, in my journey, I've found strangers coming on board and helping me in such powerful manners, which I think even my family could never do that for me. Then the third part is the community. I think this first, creativity, second, co-creation, where I talk about collaborations, no competition, collaboration, and the third part is community. If you build this and your ideas are structured and you build your architecture in such a manner, even at places which are disconnected, which do not even have internet, have the power to deliver solutions which can be copied by other parts of the world. So what I in my journey, innovation has been something which is actually which you have. I mean, there's no other way. Why? Because only when you're struggling, only when you're failing, only when you see that that there is no other way to negotiate yourself out of a problem. I think that is where you have to bank on the innovation. And I think once you understand the problem, I'm not even in my personal journey in terms of structuring the project. My project is called Pashmina Good Project. Um, in terms of not having a background, I would say no subject matter expertise as far as the industry is concerned. But today, I hold a lot of credibility globally in terms of this industry. To an extent that I've been formally quoted as the most credible man in Pashmina in the world. Now, how that comes to me is that I have opened the whole ecosystem in a manner that where I do not understand things myself, I am inviting the best in the world to come on board, mentor me to understand what is in front of me. Solution is never, what I'm looking at. I'm looking at putting a framework to understand the problem without a bias. Now, the bias comes from people have a commercial orientation towards industry. So what I'm doing is I have broken this industry in a manner where I'm creating linkages of this industry ecosystem with ecology, economy, art, culture, heritage, climate change, sustainability, fashion, so many others. So because I'm not an expert in all, so through technology, I'm getting all that into this project. I think innovation and a solution will be an outcome of this design, where collaborations are happening with the best in the world. It is not limited to where I am in a village in somewhere between India and China in Himalayas. The collaborations can really work. I think for me, innovation, not per se in terms of a solution, I would say innovation in terms of how you collaborate is sometimes a key. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Babar. We have real innovative person from Silicon Valley, Dr. Eric Dew. Actually, he support me a lot, and a long time before World Talent Economy Forums, we do a lot of projects. Even now, he introducing autonomous vehicle from Malaysia to Silicon Valley, and a lot of innovative support for World Talent Economy Forum. He also doing from behind the scene. So, Dr. Eric Dew, how do you want to teach me innovation again today?
Well, innovation is, well, it's constant, right? I think other people have mentioned it. It's constant. Human beings are, well, I think even other species innovate. It's not just limited to humans. Other species innovate. There's tool use, there's communication methods, adaptations to different ecological and environmental changes. That happens throughout the whole biosphere, right? All animals and plants, they all change and they all adapt. And adapting is basically innovating. That's what you're doing. And humans are part of that, and they do that kind of innovation. I think that the thing that I see that really drives innovation are the people who recognizes a problem and they work to solve it. And they are what I call the problem solvers. They are the people, they see a problem and they go, dang it, I don't like this problem anymore. There's this stone in my shoe and I got to fix it. And they're the one that they solve that problem. And then there are other people who are well, I won't say opposite, but they're sort of the yin and yang of it. They're the solution providers. Okay. Solution providers are necessary for sure. They are necessary, but they're not problem solvers. They're solution providers. They're the one that says, I know what your problem is, and this is how you solve it. And typically, these are the people who are the professionals. They are the accountants, they're the lawyers, they're HR people, and all that. They provide these solutions because they're out of the box. They have to provide out of the box solutions. Oh, you need to incorporate. Okay, fill out these forms. Oh, you have to file your taxes and all that. Fill out these forms. Blah blah blah. Those are the solution providers, and they're necessary because if you don't have them and you do something that's wrong, somebody's going to come and F you over real bad. And if you don't have those protections there, people will figure it out how to beat you in those certain ways, in the legal or in the financial way, and they can screw you over. So they're necessary. But the problem solvers are the one that kind of see, this is what the problem is. And then by recognizing what the problem is, it really is. If you recognize what the problem is, you got 90% of the problem done, the problem solved, and you just have to do it. Okay. And the technology, whether it's high tech or low tech, or it may not even be a tech, it could very well be that the solution to a problem is just getting some people to follow in a certain way, to do it in a certain way, which actually I think, convincing people to do things in a certain way is a much harder thing than building a technology. So, but that's another thing in itself. So getting the solution is just recognizing what the problem is. And I wrote an article that I published on LinkedIn, which is something easy to do since, there's no editors and all that, about a folk hero in America called John Henry. I don't know, those outside of America may not know who John Henry is, but within America, we sing the song, okay, Edward knows of John Henry. John Henry was a hammer. Yeah, he was born with a hammer in his hand, right? He was born in a hammer in his hand. He loved the hammer. And when he grew up, he was in charge of hammering a spike into the wall of a mountainside so that you can stick a dynamite into that and blow it up, and then you'll create a hole, and you keep doing that until you build a tunnel through the mountainside to go from one side to the other. And one day the foreman shows up and says, hey, we got this steam power hammer, and this steam power hammer is going to be able to do it bigger, faster, and quicker, and cheaper, and so forth. And John Henry was adamant that he didn't want to be beaten by a steam power hammer. So they had a race between the steam power hammer and John Henry. And, John Henry was hammering, Johnny Cash actually sung a song on this. So you can hear the story there much better than the way I'm telling it. And so John Henry was hitting this. And at the end of the day, he dug out more dirt or more rocks than the steam power hammer, because the steam power hammer actually failed eventually or something like that. But also at the end of the day, John Henry dies of a broken heart because he worked so hard that he dies. And my conclusion of the story is not to celebrate John Henry. It's to say, don't be a John Henry. Okay. If someone comes to you with a new technology, especially if you were John Henry, especially if you were him, you would say, hey, this thing is a cool tool. Let me use it. Let me be the steam power hammer driver, and I'm going to dig it 3 times better because I know where to hit it and I know how hard to hit it. And then I don't have to exert myself and kill myself. And then together I will be able to dig even faster. Because the way to see it is to recognize that what was the problem? What is the problem that he was trying to solve? To John Henry, the problem was, how do I use this hammer faster to dig a hole into this rock so I can, stick a dynamite in? As you already see, there are already plenty of technologies involved there. One is dynamite. One is a 12-pound hammer, which has to be made with certain, heavy steel and all that. Those are not trivial technologies. Okay, so adding another technology, a steam power hammer, into it is actually a very incremental innovation. It's not a disruptive innovation. It's already incremental because power, steam, hammer, those are existing technology, and somebody just happened to just put them together. Okay, the problem that John Henry is trying to solve is a problem of transportation. There are people on one side of the mountain cannot deliver their goods to the other side of the mountain before the food rotted. Okay, it takes you 2 weeks to transport, and this is before refrigeration, right? If it takes you 2 weeks to transport food around to the other side of the mountain, well, you ain't got a customer because nobody wants to eat rotten food. So that's a problem. If it takes you 2 weeks to go visit your family on the other side of your relatives or whatever on the other side of the mountain, and during that time you're going to be beset by ruffians and burglars and animals and all that, then you're not going to go, and then you separate yourself and you can't go. But you can dig it through a tunnel, and then with that tunnel you can bring the food across in a day. Then you've opened the market. That is a huge problem. And if John Henry saw the problem as a transportation problem of getting things from one side of the mountain to the other, then the solution is by any means necessary. And if you figure out, by any means necessary, hey, a steam power hammer is going to be just as good as a manual one, and I don't have to die for it. Okay. And then he would figure out that, hey, I would be the best user of the steam power hammer. And after 5 years of using it, I'm going to be the best salesperson for the steam power hammer. I'm going to make 10 times more money. And all I have to do is wear a nice suit, and I don't even have to get sweaty anymore. That's what he could have done. So innovation is problem solving. Okay. And when you solve a problem, it's by any means necessary. It's not saying, I'm going to apply algebra or I'm going to apply calculus. That's solution providing. Okay. Solution providing does not innovate. Solution providing is to protect your problem solving. Because when you do problem solving, you're going to do things all sorts of different ways. And once people figure it out that, hey, you did it, they're going to try to do the same thing, or they're going to try to beat you, whatever. And the solution providing kind of helps protect you. So that's solution providing versus problem solving for me.
Excellent, Dr. Eric. And most important point, I personally believe that we need good mentors always, like you. And I'm sure that those who joining today, all of them are very good mentors for a startup. And World Talent Economy Forum, we are developing innovation lab in not only in Kuala Lumpur, in around the world. So hopefully we will join together, we will work together, and we will bring different youth communities, and we will like give them the real informations how actually they have to build up their business and other points. So we have our new friend Shakil. Yes, I think you can introduce yourself because this is the first time you join with us, and then Mr. Jem-Id. Yes.
Yeah, so good morning. So for viewers who haven't seen me elsewhere on IBM and elsewhere, I am involved in finance. I run a financial services company in Liechtenstein and in Singapore. And look, technology, it's not my area of specialty as such, but I think that technology has just my lifetime especially has advanced so much. And when it comes to the tools that people have access to at home, they're tools that used to be the exclusive domain of big, large companies, and now you have access to them. People are able to collaborate. We've seen that not just in my industry in finance, where there are very few tools that banks have that are not actually accessible to the public if they want them. For relatively small costs. I mean, some of the more advanced trading systems might cost you sort of $1,500 a month, and that may be a lot of money if you're just starting out. But for a lot of home traders who have a bit more money but perhaps don't have the resources available to them, they can actually use these tools. We see the same thing in medical as well, where people are able to collaborate across international borders. They're able to, share ideas. We've seen a lot of that happening with the coronavirus, and attempts to either cure or to provide a vaccine is groups of people being able to collaborate from all different countries and share, some of their research and things like that. We've seen the same thing with surgeries, where a specialist can come in and see things in high definition. I think that, in the tech startup space, it's really democratized the world in a way that you wouldn't expect. People from any country or from multiple countries can come up with a good idea, can collaborate, and then can actually bring that idea to market. From a perspective, from an investor perspective, which is what I look at, I can find tech sometimes a little bit challenging to understand, because you often see book values and price to earnings ratios that can be very, very high. And oftentimes you'll actually see that tech companies can be quite valuable even if they don't have an awful lot of revenue. And a lot of that has to do with their user base and the potential value of that user base that they have. So, those are all very, very interesting things. And I think that, look, tech's definitely here to stay. We live in an age now where, I think I saw a report a few weeks ago, a 15-year-old kid created an app, put it on the App Store, and, made a few $1 million at 15. So that's the thing, there's an idea that you might have in your life. You might think, well, I wish there was this, or my life would be easier if I could have access to that. And then all of a sudden you go and build it. Not to give a plug, but a very good friend of mine has actually just started an app herself, and I went to the launch of that app, and it's a real estate app that basically helps people to identify properties that they may want to purchase. And she doesn't know much about tech. An idea that she had, and she's been able to bring that to fruition in a matter of less than a year. So it's an exciting time out there, and I think that everybody should have a look around and have a look at this space and see what opportunities are there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Jamid, I know that you have your foundation and it's working in Africa. So how do you want to introduce your idea and experience on startup and innovation?
Thank you, Sharif. Once again, you have assembled a great panel, and I've been learning a lot as they've been speaking. And I find that to be true on every one of your shows. You're doing a fantastic job. And I just want to say that my background, I've done startups. I've been on boards of startups, and I've been an advisor to startups. And more often than not, my experience is borne out by stats in general. They fail more often than they succeed. So the main thing is to persevere, is not to let failure hold you back. My father was a professor of mathematics, and he would tell me when I was very young, if you say 2 + 2 = 5, don't say it's wrong. Say it's the first approximation, and you're getting closer and closer to the answer. So this is one of the things that I want to say, because what I always say is that you have to start with yourself. And then with all due respect to our esteemed GOAT Nomad, I use a different C word. Rather than collaboration, I say community. You start with yourself, then you build the community around you, because none of us can do it alone. And one of the things is you have to have self-confidence, but don't let it turn into arrogance, because John Henry beat his head against the brick wall, and other people such as myself have been arrogant and have ended up with bruised foreheads beating ourselves against the brick wall. So you have to have self-confidence, because you will experience failures, you will experience setbacks. This is just part of life. This is part of moving forward. But you cannot let that stop you. If you have self-confidence, you can tear down the wall. And this is part of what you have to be an entrepreneur, to be an innovator. You have to have the self-confidence. Do not let it turn into arrogance. And know that you cannot do it yourself. You must build your community, your team. You must collaborate with others. These are the only ways that you will end up being successful in the long run. The other thing is you must become comfortable with the awkwardness. You know, people will look at you as though you're crazy. People will say you that will never work. So that's part of self-confidence, but you just get comfortable in your own skin. Yeah, people aren't going to believe me. And you keep going. If they say no, they will say no 1,000 times. You say yes once and you succeed. So these are the things, these are the character traits that you must bring. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that not everyone is cut out for this. Some people are support providers. Not everyone is the problem solver. So that's where you bring the team in. You get the solution providers working together with the problem solvers. And that's when you become successful. Because you can't do it with just problem solvers, and you can't do it with just solution providers. You have to have a team. And so this collaboration, or what I think of as a community, because you're in it together. You're not successful by yourself just because you had a great idea. It's not going to manifest in the real world unless you have a team. Thank you again, Sharif, for having me on.
Thank you, Mr. James. I have a question for Professor Edward. As you are part of think tank, always I think there are many students already. They are knocking, like Abid, Shahrukh, Mehdi, many students. Those who always engage with World Talent Economy forums, and we are taking their classes and trying to developing many human resources, especially for their for their startups and many interesting things we are doing right now. So my fact is that always they ask me one point, that what will be the great process for startup. And second things, you have to understand, these people from developing nations, they have limited resources and limited support, and their society, especially where we from, example country like, I think Dr. Babur can explain more, even country like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, they actually do not like someone fail in their life. Society do not like these things. But our youth community, they love to take challenges. So they want to build new things. So how we can develop better ecosystem. And second point, it's very crucial, I believe, that in education system, we are running from 100 years of syllabus and many things. It's not helpful for innovation. Even in classroom, I saw that personally, if any student try to do something from outside the box, the system said, no, you cannot. You will fail. So I'm sure that many of our audience has same problem, same challenges. So what the solution you have? What the advice you have? And I want to ask the same question to all of our panelists.
Well, that's a very complex question. I'll try to answer short. And if any of your listeners or viewers want to contact me, by the way, they're welcome to do so. I posted my link in the chat there. I don't know if they have access to it. humanachievementalliance.org is the website. But there are a couple of things. In fact, it's interesting. I just posted something on my website under the future economy. And one of the things I said is that we need a change of mindset. And a lot of people have pointed this out, that we you know, in our world, we make a distinction, an artificial distinction between workers and investors and entrepreneurs and managers. But every human being is an investor in their own human capital. They're an entrepreneur of their own life. They're a manager of their own time and their own resources. So you have to, first of all, think of yourself. The point James made about, be self-confident, but don't be arrogant. You have to have that kind of mindset. And this is especially true in some more traditional societies. I've done a lot of work internationally, as many other people have. And there is often a kind of conservatism. There's often, if you fail once, you're a failure as a human being. Whereas we know in this country, certainly in the United States, Henry Ford failed twice with a business before he founded Ford Motor Company. I mentioned that Thomas Edison failed 6,000 times before he succeeded. And you can go on. Steve Jobs, as we all know, got kicked out of his own company that he founded. And then as it was about to go bankrupt, he was brought back and he basically innovative and so forth. So the most important thing I'd say is to highlight what James has said is you have to have confidence in yourself. The most important thing is your moral character, your strength, and so forth. The virtue of independence means that you are self-reflective. You're not arrogant. You understand you're going to make mistakes. And so you try to step back and say, well, was I right about this? Are the critics right? Or maybe all the critics are wrong and I'm right. And fine. In that case, you just stand up for what you understand in your own mind. That's what independence is. You have to have that virtue. And yes, especially in traditional societies, a lot of people are going to say, well, you shouldn't be doing this. The education system, as you say, even in the United States, is Peter Diamandis, who's one of my heroes, says it's baroque and broke. We have a system, a 19th century assembly line system that simply doesn't work, even for current needs, much less a future in which we're going to need people who can manipulate the human genome to get rid of diseases, or to create nanotech bots that can go in. And for example, my poor mom is up in Baltimore in an assisted living home, 89 years old, suffering from Alzheimer's. Wouldn't it have been great if we could have nanobots that could go through the brain-blood barrier and rebuild the brain? Wouldn't that be wonderful? We need people to do that. And yet we have a system, a schooling system that doesn't even deal with current challenges, much less future challenges. The nice thing is that with technology, we can basically break out of the current systems, and it's international. It's not just here in the United States. I want to see international competition. I deal, as with David there, we're all dealing with, for example, a group working in Africa. I would love to see, Africa, which has always been behind because their markets are not particularly free. I'd like to see folks in Nigeria really become leaders. I'd like to see folks in Malaysia become leaders. So I want to create an international movement to change your mind, to change your attitude, and hopefully to change the public policies. Wouldn't it be great if the innovations that allow us to have this conversation globally, wouldn't it be great if that kind of innovative thinking were applied to education? Because you educate the individual. I have two 9-year-old, they just turned 10, two daughters that just turned 10 years old, and they each have different talents. One of them is not good in math, one is really good in math, one is great in art, and so forth. But they put them into the same school and say, you're going to take the same classes. We need innovation in education.
Excellent. Dr. Eric. Dr. Eric Dev.
You're mute.
Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. Okay. I keep forgetting about that. Yes. Innovation. We keep talking about this, and I think I've also mentioned this in one of your education-related fields. I agree that education has to change. For example, I have a PhD in math, and one of the typical questions you would ask in mathematics at, let's say, freshman, sophomore year in high school level would be, how do you solve the equation 3x squared plus 4x minus 7 equals 0? How do you solve for x? Okay, and that is the expected answer is use the quadratic equation, right? The quadratic equation is x is equal to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Okay, I can remember that. I can't do the cubic equation or the quartic, but I can do the quadratic. Okay, and the expectation is that you use that as the solution providing, right? Your solution provider. Here's the solution, and this is how you're going to use, and you're going to use it to solve this problem. Okay, but if you ask a student that before teaching the quadratic equation, they would probably do a guess. They would probably do trial and error. Let me try x equals to 2. Let me try x equals to 3. And then they might have done something that is what would be called Newton's method in a more general sense. when you actually write it into a program in computer programming. You would use something as a Newton's method, where you would go back and forth until you sort of get it, until you get a good approximation. And in real life cases, when you're doing things that are not quadratics, where there is no formula for you to do it, Newton's method is actually the best way. And given that computers can do it much quickly, you would just use Newton's method no matter what, because it's just faster. There are edge cases where Newton's method will never work, because it'll just bounce around and it'll just go cycle. But that's you have to create a problem where that won't work, rather than just chances are it will work. So that's the difference in school, is that what we have done in school, and this is traditional, is that we have been teaching solutions at school, and that's the way it was done. Because if you think about how education had been done over the course of human history, is that they figured out that this works and they teach that to the next generation. If you plant during spring, and how do you know it's spring? It's because it's thawing, or it's because that's when we celebrate this particular religious holiday or something like that. If you plant now, then you'll be able to pick up harvest the food in the summer and in the fall. Don't ask me why, but that's the solution, because it works. Okay, and because they probably tried planting in the winter, and the seed just kind of like froze up and all that, and they tried planting in the fall and so forth. And so people discover things, and they discovered a solution, and they pass on the solution from one generation to the next. And that's how education sort of get their way, right? Education, higher education, back during the time of universities like Oxford and Cambridge and all that, they came about because they figured out these things are a way to do certain things, and they taught solution providers. They taught people to become attorneys. They taught people to become financiers and all that. And again, those are things that you have to do. Those are necessary tools, how to be, government people and all that. They teach that. Okay. They don't teach innovation, primarily because innovation was kind of slow, right? It's, how often do you see innovation? It happens, but not fast, and not quickly enough for people to recognize, oh my God, there's a new iPhone coming out. Oh my God, there's this happening. When you're bombarded with innovation like we are now, then you can start to get the gist that, hey, problem solving is a different thing. So to teach problem solving is kind of hard. It requires a shift in the way education, and unfortunately, the biggest obstacle for that are actually the parents. It's not the teachers. The teachers are willing to innovate and teach different ways, but heck, man, the parents and the students, they go, I want to know about this quadratic equation. I want you to teach me the quadratic equation. And I know that personally because I taught in school, and one summer I was teaching summer math in a community college, and it is summertime, summer school, and I want to have fun and teach some new things and kind of like, hey, how will you do something like this? And boy, these students, they go like, I got to know this thing because I'm going to be taking calculus. And if I don't know this thing, I can't do the calculus, and I can't get the AP classes, and I can't whatever, and I can't get to college. And they were so scared of wanting to just play around with math and kind of like figure out different things and all that, that I actually have to back off from doing that and go back to teaching the traditional, okay, so this is calculus, or, this is a polynomial, and this is this. And I wanted to shoot myself in the head because it was so freaking boring. Okay, but that's what they want, and the parents want that. And you can see that right now. I don't know how it is in other countries, but here in the United States, we still have somewhat lockdown, and, we have parents wanting the schools to reopen and all that, and they're tired of teaching, through all these other ways. Online teaching, which is what we're doing right now, right? We're conversing online and doing this kind of a thing. This is actually a very innovative way of doing it, but the parents don't want that. Okay, it's not the teacher saying that, hey, I don't want to do it this way. The teachers actually prefer this way because they don't want to get killed with COVID, But the parents say, I want my students back in school. Okay. I want my students back there learning the old way. Okay. And they don't want to do this teaching through, a screen like this, through Zoom or whatever method. And they're all screaming, hey, it's not going to work. It's worthless, and blah, blah, blah. And, innovation, like what everyone else here have said, innovation is 99% failure. We're going to fail using this thing correctly. We're going to fail using online teaching correctly for maybe a year or two. It may take a year or two. And unfortunately, that may impact a year or two's worth of education for some people. And I can understand that if you have a kid and you're going to say, hey, we're going to try this thing, but maybe it's going to fail for you. Well, who wants to be the parent that's going to have a bunch of kids that, that cohort of kids going through and having education screw up for them, right? Nobody wants to do that. And I understand that. Okay. You don't want to, if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, I got this great education system. Well, we haven't tried it out yet. This is brand new. It's completely new. We haven't tried it out. But I want your kid to start at age 5 with me. And we're going to go through all the way until, 12th grade, 17. So between 5 and 17, you're going to use my system. But I don't have anybody using it yet. So you guys going to be the first. You're going to be my beta testers. I hope you don't mind. Who the hell is going to do that with their kids, right? I mean, who's going to give their kids to me? I couldn't pay people enough money for them to give their kids to me because they're going to say, what happened if you screwed up, right? Nobody's going to do that. So they do the tried and true. And so one of my solutions that I have, because this is a problem, the solution is not to start from the first grade to kindergarten. The solution is to start from the last quarter or the last semester of college. You start there, okay? You start there and you're going to take out a cohort of students and say, hey, we're going to try something new for you, okay? It's going to be different for your last quarter. We're going to teach you some certain things and you're going to try certain things and we're going to make you think differently. And if we screw up, you're not going to lose too much, okay? And then we got to measure how well we do because we don't know if it's going to succeed, okay? So we're going to measure, and a good measurement, a good metric to use is earning power, for example, all right? And if we can say that you can earn more money using our system, I think that's a good way of doing it, and then we do that with that cohort. And then we move back another semester. And then we move back another semester and another year and so forth. And after maybe 40, 50 years worth, we can get it down to first grade or so.
Eric,
that's one of the things that you should do.
Eric, I just want to make one 30-second comment here because I do a lot of work in education. Most inner city schools are dystopian hellholes. And I know Baltimore City, which is up the road from me, and they would probably the parents would be absolutely thrilled to try anything other than the mess they're in now. 13 high schools in Baltimore City had 0 students a couple of years ago proficient in math. Not only 30%, not only 20%, 0. Inner cities are desperate for this. And they would basically say, yeah, throw out the whole damn system. We'll try anything. So go for it, Eric.
Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a different issue then. Okay. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of all school districts in even in California. I'm here in San Francisco and I'm just looking at what we have here. And obviously, San Francisco does not claim to be the best in education in the Bay Area. I think Palo Alto has a better claim and maybe some other part in Cupertino and so forth. But again, those are weird metrics of what the claims to be. Okay, they make that claim based on, I don't know, how many people can pass, can apply the quadratic equation. Okay, I don't consider that as a good metric. First of all, yeah, I think being able to regurgitate, x is equals to minus b plus the minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Being able to do that is not a metric that I would like to use. Being able to quote Shakespeare or whatever is not what I consider as a good metric for measuring the ability of the school to do what they did. Those things I think are traditional ways of measuring, and we have to redefine what those metrics should be. The habit of thought.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Maybe we should talk offline, or some other time about that. I would like to hear
Okay.
what that is about. So I don't want to.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
I don't want to monopolize.
Okay. I want to give just to Professor David, then Professor Donald. Yes.
Yes, hi. Many good points have been made, and hopefully I can add one or two more, but the discussion has been terrific. Pardon me. So back to education system. As many of the viewers know that I think politics can be used as a positive force to help solve some of this. Here in Arizona, keep pressure on school boards, keep pressure wherever we can to try to open up to new ideas. Stuck in the status quo, we've always taught this way, we'll continue to teach this way. This way gets to the right kind of results that we're looking for. That's what we need to overcome. So that's one way that I go about it. So pressuring for that kind of change. But don't leave it there. Look at yourself and say, what can I do? Because that's what each individual then has the most control for. So for example, I say, look at opportunities to self-educate. I think this is really important everywhere, but maybe even more so, say, in Africa and other parts of the developing world. Seek for ways that you can go out and add to your own education the way you want to learn. Not everybody learns the same way. Find a means that works for you and apply yourself to that. Seek out credentials, perhaps. I worked the last 20 years, I've taught at the community college level and in private schools, primarily in information technology areas. In that area, there are many good private certifications. You can get them from Microsoft, you can get them from Cisco, you can get vendor agnostic certifications that are not per se part of the education system, but they're respected in the marketplace. So seek those out. I've done that for myself, and I would say some of the best parts of my education have been preparing for and then achieving those and then teaching those to other people. But that's something that you can take into your own hand, where you can seek out whatever those credentials are. How do you do that? Well, the internet is a great way to do that. There are the credentials that I am associated with or that I use and that I teach. You can look for what's required of you online. You can work and find many free or inexpensive resources to study for these credentials. You can work with tutors from all over the world to help you get through the hard parts. But this is a place where you can take education into your own hands and not leave it for somebody else to fix it for you. Now, back to the subject of teaching in public or private colleges. Teaching in the public school system was more of a challenge for me, I should say, because when I would pick up a course, I was an adjunct professor, so I would pick up courses and have to meet the guidelines in a time frame with a book that had already been selected for me as far as what it was that I had to teach. But I found that I could push the envelope a bit with whoever the department head was to be able to teach how to achieve this knowledge other than just the rote method, and try to get students into the idea of problem solving, not just learning all these different aspects so that they could later pass a test and say, you know, here's proof of what I know. Because that creates a hollow experience. You've passed the test. Now you go to apply it. How do you apply it? You need to be able to reason through all of this as you go. I found this much easier to do in the private institutions that I taught in, for a factor of reasons, for a great many reasons, but maybe one of them is that I think the private institutions attracted students based on job placement rates and things of that nature. So there was a bit of a marketplace there. We're going to prepare you, and then we're going to show you that we can place you in the industry. So in doing so, having students that could reason through every area versus just regurgitating facts and figures was more attractive in the private institutions. But you could still do it some, maybe more difficulty in the public systems. So these days, working with students, I do primarily over the internet, and I do primarily tutoring and coaching sessions for computer certifications primarily. So that's a real good example of what I've been talking about, because the computer certification, especially the more entry-level ones, are simple question answers. The more advanced certifications, you might have 4 questions on a 2-hour test, and you have to go through and design a solution. So it's easier to convince your students and whoever is paying for that education that they need to be able to reason through this and not just have the answers. But even in the most basic tests, typically the reason that people will pay me to tutor them is because they've already tried passing the certification tests once or twice, and they didn't do well. So they're open to a new way of approaching it. And that new way of approaching it is look at the test. You've done your preparation. Look at the test. Reason through the questions. Look at the questions. Look at the answers. But then also look at association. Bring all these other factors into line. So the internet can help with all this, not only while you're learning, but as you are developing and looking to make connections for your future, and as you're looking for future employment. The internet doesn't solve all the problems, but the internet can be very helpful. So I'll give you a quick example here in summation. A friend of mine is a professional photographer, and he does quite well these days, but he didn't always. He self-educated on how to be a photographer. What he did, though, was he took his photography and used social media to show off what he could do. And he would show off all different aspects of his photography. He was found by a major automobile corporation who just called him off of social media and said, "We've seen your examples. We would like you to come do a photo shoot for us." And that was the big break that he needed to get in there. He manufactured his own education. He manufactured his own marketing. And he didn't get discovered by accident. He did it on purpose.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Professor Donald.
These amazing people and the amazing points that they make. I know I could be wrong, but what I heard Edison's great quote that I use, even though the number may be off, is that he said, "I never failed. I just tried 10,000 things that didn't work." So, in fact, there's the great philosopher William James once said basically that there's no failure, only feedback. If you try something and it doesn't work, you've got more information so that you can do it. And talking to what David said, I've taught in industry. I've taught some at universities and quite a bit in industry. And in industry, what they do is they give you this binder. It's a 3-ring binder full of when I started, it was slides that you actually put on it, but now they've transferred the 3-ring binder to basically PowerPoint type presentations. And what I do is I focus on the exercises, and I just I say to people, I am not going to read the slides to you. You can read yourself. There is absolutely nothing more boring than having an instructor read slides to you. It's awful. And so I encourage the students. I say, if something goes wrong when you're doing the exercises, be thankful, because you're going to be learning something. And they said no other instructor could pull this off, but the students would actually be going, I have a problem. I'm going to try and figure it out. And I point out to them, I said, you could train pigeons to copy things out of books. I mean, that's absolutely nothing. I want to make a point. Oh, I want to say one other great quote that I love, which is that the science fiction writer Robert Wilson once said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And so everything that we want, everywhere we look around, there's stuff that are good solutions to problems. I mean, people sit around at the water cooler or in the coffee shop and discuss, and they come up with great solutions for stuff. For a while, I was working with an angel group, and so people thought I could give them money, so they'd start sending me business plans. And I had countless business plans that I looked at, and the people would, want me to sign non-disclosures, which I wouldn't do. But what was hysterical is that at any given time, they were almost exactly the same. They all thought they discovered something that no one else could possibly imagine, but the truth of the matter is that they did. So why is it that somebody that has a business plan that's exactly the same as somebody else's, why is it somebody gets funded and gets a successful company, and somebody with the exact same plan in the exact same place with the exact same background doesn't? And it's something I learned early on. I was a software engineer, hired gun, and I worked at, not for, a lot of different companies. And when I was first starting out, I met this guy, and he was telling me, I worked on this big project at this company, but it never saw the light of day. And I worked on this other big project for this other company. It never saw the light of day. And I realized not a single solitary piece of code that guy wrote ever was used by anybody. And I asked myself the question, what is it that allows this guy to be successful and keep doing this when no one has any idea whether his software works or not? And I realized that he was a very outgoing person who cared about other people. And I realized that the social skills were probably more important than the technical skills. And it's interesting. You asked what the metric is. I know very well what the metric is in Palo Alto. It's what colleges you get into. So the brass ring is Stanford, of course, and Stanford is extremely, extremely difficult to get into. I mean, if you've volunteered in Africa, you play a musical instrument, and your 4.5 grade point average, you're only competing with, 10 people that are just like you. I mean, but the weird thing is that Stanford kind of has this way, which I absolutely love. You also have to be a good person. They've got a no assholes rule. In fact, there's a book called The No Assholes Rule that was written by a Stanford business professor. I want to, there's something, a note here that I made, which is that a lot of people mentioned that you don't want to be, that you can't be like the same as everybody else. And this seems like a very academic point and kind of unrelated to things. So people sometimes have a little bit of trouble with this. But if you just think and you just kind of go inside and realize that people get up in the morning, they go to work, they sit down at a desk, they know what they're supposed to do. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. People, we do things. You can't just walk into a store and, you know, take off your clothes or something like that. Everything that we do is scripted in these patterns, almost everything. And it has to be that way, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to communicate. We wouldn't understand what another person is doing. And so organizations, I've often said, exist, especially big corporations, to stop innovation, because you don't want somebody in your organization doing something that you don't get what they're doing, because it's got to, everything has to fit together like a machine, and that's what they try to make happen. We can never be successful at it, but that's the goal. And so in a way, what he was talking about, service versus problem solving, is in a way that there's like disruptive innovation and incremental innovation. So within organizations, sometimes somebody will get an idea of a better way to check that, you know, the part works, or a little bit better way, so they cut one step out of the process of making something and things like that. And that's innovation, it is. But I got to know this guy, James March, at Stanford, and I've mentioned this before. He's a very well-known expert in organizations. He partnered with Herbert Simon, who got the Nobel Prize, and they worked together, and he's a great guy. And when he teaches leadership, he uses, the book he uses is Don Quixote. And for people that aren't familiar with Don Quixote, he was this guy who read these romantic poems. The book was written in the 1600s. And he read these romantic poems and decided that he was a knight. He was one of the characters in these romantic poems. So he went around trying to save damsels in distress and all the things that knights do. And he famously saw a windmill and thought it was a giant and had a battle with it. He saw a group of sheep and he believed that they were an army. And James March said that that's kind of what you have to do, because all these rules that I'm talking about that we unconsciously know and we have to follow, if we follow those rules, we're going to wind up doing the same thing as everybody else, because that's just what happens. And unconsciously, it's like more peaceful in a way to follow those rules, because then everyone knows what you're doing. You know what everybody else is doing. You fit in a way that's the most peaceful. But if you go against those rules and try and break those rules, then people aren't going to understand what you're doing. They're not going to be able to predict what you're doing. It's going to make them uncomfortable. So however, there will be people who like it. They want to be outside of the box. They don't like being comfortable. I'm like that. And so that goes back to the whole idea that every single person has said about collaboration, which is that you have to find the people that can see your vision and want to be outside of the box and do things, because you're going to need resources that you don't even know the name for. When you start a startup, you're going to have problems that you don't even know what to call them. I mean, and you're going to have financial problems, you're going to have legal problems, you're going to have all kinds of problems that if you're an engineer, you have no experience with. And of course, the engineers do things that financial people have no experience with. It's amazing how simple things can be. Like, they completely revolutionized the financial system in Kenya. And the way that they did it is that they discovered that if you bought a phone card that you could, from the phone company for $50, say for an instance, you know, they have their own currency, that you could redeem it at a different place than you bought it. So what they would do is they would buy a phone card for $50. They would text the number to redeem it and get your money back to another place in Kenya. And they started developing this system where everybody was using money that they just texted to each other. There's no brilliant, there's no top-down thing. This is just incredibly clever thing that they did. And now we do stuff like that all the time. Everybody does it. I mean, you know, the WhatsApp in China does the same thing. It's a global thing. And so I want to get back to what we were talking about education. And that, again, is that same sort of thing where you have that structure of what people expect. Like in the United States, they came up with this thing called Common Core. And I took the time to learn how they multiply using Common Core instead of the way I learned by memorizing. And it's fantastic. I do it that way all the time now. I mean, I learned, but it's different. So parents are like, I learned the multiplication tables and you're going to learn the multiplication tables too. That's just the way it's done. And that inertia is back to what I said, that the idea that we're all following these rules so that we can get along, and you have to push them. And I put a paper there. It's a famous paper called The Iron Cage Revisited. And in the paper, he says that you can push it so far, but you can't do something that nobody understands. You have to work combination working within and out the system. So when you're in Finland, and I'm going to get to Finland, but even in Silicon Valley, if you want to get money from a venture capitalist or things like that, a lot of times one of the first questions they ask you is, what dollar amount is the most that you've ever managed? And if you say, okay, I ran this department that had a budget of $10 million and 25 people working for it, 100 people working for it, they'll take you seriously. But if you've never done that, you're not going to, they're going to need somebody who has done that in your company. So those rules and that structure are part of everything. And I think that there's a cultural problem in the United States, which is that that thing about us not wanting to change. And the United States has a very conservative part of it. Some people that are very against change. And I just want to mention that in Finland, they stopped having separate subjects. So for an instance, when I went to high school, I took algebra, English, blah, 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 like that. They don't do that. It's just, they mush everything together. And they teach empathy. So how do you know what people need unless you can relate to other people? So one of the things, you can actually look up social intelligence, empathy, things like that, and find out about them online. So whatever you want to do, being able to do that thing of recruiting other people into your vision, you're Don Quixote, but you have to have the people go along with you. That's social skills. And goes back to what I said about the guy who'd never had his software see the light of day. That's probably more important than anything else that you can learn and study.
Okay, thank you, Professor Donalds. Dr. Babar Afzal. So I think that you can give us a better explanation from India.
All right, so very interesting, and I think I'm learning a great deal from this learned bunch. Uh, or a little more background. I come from a place in Jammu and Kashmir. Um, uh, when I grew up, the background was terrorism, and we literally had a problem of getting groceries to the home on a daily basis. That was the problem that we solved while we were growing up, and I remember my first job was as a hacker, and I I am a known hacker in India, and even I've solved a lot of cybercrime cases globally, and over and above that, I'm an ex McKinsey as well. So uh, when Professor Donald was talking about Herbert Simon, I could understand what he was trying to say. Now, Herbert Simon was the father of artificial intelligence and behavioral finance, and his work is extremely and widely read. And yeah, what he quotes is that how do you solve a complex problem? And the analogy in a nutshell that he gives is that all you have to do is break it down into smaller components. And when you break that down into smaller components and try to solve that smaller component, you will see that that solution can be easily applied and expanded onto the complex problem, and can be solved. So if you know how to break a complex problem into smaller bits and solve smaller bits, I think that is how you reach to a solution for a bigger problem. Now, Dr. Donald, Professor Donald also spoke about history. You see a lot of things. So I think when you talk about innovation, the reason why you will see that history repeats itself. See so many cases, on a daily basis, you say this part is repeating again, and mostly why? Because people have not been able to figure out ways to solve it, and that is why there's a loop, and that is why our understanding of waves comes in. That is where timing is important for innovation. So when I look at problems and innovation, I think there's so many other things that also play a major role. Your understanding of the waves and the trends, that is why we say forward thinking entrepreneurs. I mean, the only difference is that how do they see this whole thing pan out. And I think when you develop that ability to problem solve, I think that is where opportunities are also hidden. Coming from where I am, and I talk about the Indian context, there is something that we call frugal innovation. We have a name for it called Jugaad. Now, in India, we see that this works very, very well, and this is where if you talk about the way societies are evolving in India at the moment, and what the biggest challenge is. How do you conclude that the brilliant idea that you have is not the same idea that your neighbor is also working on? How do you know that this idea has not been tried 20,000 times in the past 2 decades and it has failed? How do you know where is the reference of what you're doing, and how do you place yourself in that in that spirit of innovation? Today everyone holds brilliant idea. I mean, this is where yeah, India is now. It's a hotbed for startups, and the biggest challenge is how do you know that you are not working on the same idea that your neighbor is working on, and how do you know that the idea that you're working on, the reason why people are not working on this idea, the reason why they are not working is there's only one reason, that this idea was tried and tested 20,000 times and it did not work. That is why people are not on this idea. So you think so there's a there's a illusion that gets created, that if you're the only one who's doing it, and you have stuck on a business idea, but there might be a reasonable probability that this idea has failed so many times that people really do not want to work on it. So there's a way to look at it, and I would say in current times I talk about 3 C's: problem solving, creativity, co-creation, collaboration, and community. I think the spin is within this, and if you're able to tie all these things together, I think that is where I would say, innovation should be meaningful. And when I speak about innovation in the context of a country which is still on a path to growth, Indian economy is growing, and we're still being considered a third world country. In a place like India, I mean, there are opportunities where you see that you really do not have to go and look for problems. All you have to do is just open your eyes. I think the problems waiting to be discovered, and there's so many, and I think that is where the opportunity also lies. And that is in context of innovation. It has to be meaningful. It has to solve a bigger problem. You have to have a certain mindset, yes, that you want to solve it. And today, in a society, when you talk about structuring teams for startups, I think one great ability as founders or people who are working in the startups context, one ability that is inherent today in structuring those teams is that how do you place people? Now, it is understood that even though everyone wants to innovate, not many are in that framework to innovate. Some are good at operations. Yes, some would be good people who can operate but not innovate. So how do you I think that is where, when you talk about team building in terms of innovation, some people really get the kick in terms of understanding problems, solving problems, creating solutions, but some really do not get that kick. Some get the kick from operating solutions. So this is where you have to understand, when you're structuring a solution, or when you're building a startup on a great idea, you have to divide teams. And finally, at the end, I would say this is it is also about challenging the norm. So sometimes there are ways which are tried and tested, which are the norm. So as innovators, as people who are solving problems, should not really care about the right way. I mean, the right way can be ignored at times when you're really looking at problems. So that bias the lens with which we look at problems, sometimes that is corrupted, and that is why, as Professor Donald also quoted about, the education system. I would like to quote. I'm a TED residency finalist, New York as well. I've been 7 times TEDx speaker. This gives me an opportunity to come in contact with some of the top innovators in education in the world. There's a fantastic teacher who got the TED $1 million prize. His name is Sugata Mitra. Now, Sugata, he ran an experiment in a village, and that experiment is called Hole in the Wall, and another one called Nanny in the Cloud. Now, what that experiment was, that he dug a hole in a wall in a village, in one of the remotest villages of India, where children really did not have any background in education. They never went to school. He keeps a computer in the wall, and the mouse is hanging outside, and the computer is switched on all the time. And there are cameras who are recording what happens now in that small street called the gully in that village street, where children are playing. They have nothing to do with education. Never went to school. Now the computer, I think there was a computer-based program. Yeah, yes, Dr. Professor Edward. Yeah, yes, there was a computer-based program which was, I think, about neurons or something. Now these children, and the camera record, and this experiment says that in a span of a few days, one leader emerged out of those children. Now, when you say leader, the leader emerged, that there was a child who caught hold of the mouse and became the teacher who was teaching this computer program to rest of the children. Now, when this happens, and after some time, an exam was taken, an exam was taken for these children, and simultaneously exam was taken for children in one of the top schools in the country. All children scored the same. There was an absence of a teacher in the village There was no background in education. So the way things are evolving, the educational model is evolving around the world, where all you have to teach children is not solutions or not answers, but how to pose the right questions. I think if we are able to do that in the right context, solutions, we have Google. I mean, talk about Pythagoras theorem. All you have to do is ask that question: who was Pythagoras and what did he do? I think that's it. Then children have all the tools and the mechanism to understand, go research, and figure out what he did. I think that is where the whole education model is also evolving. And I think that is where we're also pointing towards innovation. And that is what the society also needs today. I would like to end with this only, and I think the best part is when you come and experience in the journey I am in, you cannot solve from outside. The problem that you want to solve, you have to immerse yourself in the problem if you want to create a meaningful and a lasting solution. In my context, pain is the problem that cannot be solved through an economic model. You have to immerse yourself. I became a shepherd and I have been living as a nomad for 8 years. And the experience I have with a different mindset is enabling me to look at a lasting solution for 1 million people. I think sometimes it is important that you are within the problem yourself. Otherwise, solving problems from outside of that experience really do not create lasting solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Babel. Mr. Jamid, what do you want to add? Because too much of things actually come in one place, and it's really impressive. Yes.
Yes. I have that same problem. I'm writing down a bunch of notes and I'm starting to run out of paper. So, but I do want to get back to the Don Quixote, who I also love as an example, because he saw something that no one else saw. If you asked all the other people, they would have said that's a windmill. And he saw something else. Now that is part of innovation. You have to see what isn't there. You have to see something that other people do not see. Now, it could be possible that Don Quixote was a madman and he's seeing something in his own mind and nowhere else. And it's possible that some people starting an innovation are probably trying to solve a problem that's only exists in their mind. So you have to have a real problem in the real world that you want to solve. But you cannot be discouraged by people saying, no, that's a windmill. If you think there's something better than a windmill and I can see it in my mind, I can make it so it can manifest in reality. But then the other quality that you need is leadership, that we have touched around multiple times in this session. And leadership does have the need for social skills, but it also you have to have confidence. And you cannot, when everyone else around you is losing their heads, they're panicking. Oh no, we don't have enough money. Oh no, we don't have we might be solving the wrong problem. You have to be the one that stands up and says, no, we know what we're doing it the right way, and the money will come. And I will get us the money if that's what's holding us back. Or this is a problem, we need this solution provider. I will get that solution provider. So there's nothing that's going to hold us back. We're going to be successful in this. That vision and that leadership, those qualities are essential if you're going to be an innovator. Now, also we need solution providers. So look at yourself. Start with yourself. Am I a leader? Am I a natural leader? Am I a problem solver? Or am I a solution provider? Is my skill set in finance? Or is my skill set in law? Should I approach it, try to start up a company by myself? Or is my specialty legal or financial? And maybe I find somebody that needs legal or financial advice and I become a comrade in arms with that person. And then you extend that community and you get all the solution providers that you need to be successful. And that's the community that you have going forward. And you can change the world. You can make things happen. Not just the way other people see it, but the way you see how it could be. You can make it happen. And you have to have that confidence. And I also want to remind people that your ego is not your amigo. Sometimes You're going in the wrong way. And you need to assess as you're going along, am I still going in the right direction? Or have I put my foot wrong? Am I going in the wrong direction? And then you do a course correction if you have. But don't just say, because I thought of this, I'm the one who can do it all by myself. I don't need any other people, or I don't need the feedback from the environment telling me that I'm going in the wrong direction. I need a course direction. I don't need that feedback. No, you need the feedback, and you need other people. So these are things that I want everyone to understand based on my experience. And it's been proven in other people that I've talked to. Their experience has been very similar to mine. You know, you will experience adversity. You will experience doubters. You will experience financial difficulties. You will experience financial or other issues that are related. There's no easy way to do this. It's not an easy thing, but it is fairly simple. If you have confidence and you are a problem solver, make it happen. All right, but don't bang your head against the brick wall. If it's not working, readjust. Adjust your coordinate, adjust your direction. And also, I did want to say something that the point that was brought up earlier is asking the right question. You know, there's a saying, and I'm citing someone else, not myself, but you know, if you state the problem correctly, it's half solved. So if you state the problem wrong to begin with, you're just going to be treading water and eventually you will sink. So ask the right question. Am I solving an important question? Am I solving a real problem or one that just exists in my mind? And am I seeing the reality and I'm seeing beyond what everyone else is seeing? Or am I seeing something that is just, you know, my personal nitpicky way of looking at the world? It should be this way, it should be that way. No, you've got to be objective about this. Objectivity is part of it. Social skills is part of it. Leadership is definitely part of it. These are all essential qualities to have if you're going to change the world. And if you aren't going to change the world, then you're just another brick in the wall. So if you can change the world, do it. And one of the proudest parts of being from the United States was when one of our presidents said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down those walls," because there are walls between us everywhere we look. And one of the most shameful periods in my time was when we wanted to build walls between countries, because it doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter what country you're from. We're in this together. These are global problems that we're addressing. We need global solutions, and that means international solutions. That means people talking to other people. If you don't speak the same language, find someone who can translate for you. And it doesn't matter what country you're from, because these problems that we're talking about, the climate change that's happening, this is a global problem. So stop thinking that my community is only the person who lives next to me. You know, we're all in this together. Thank you again, Sharif, for a wonderful show. Proud to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. I'm sure it's one of the exclusive event for World Talent Economy Forums, and I'm sure many audience will enjoy these sessions. We are trying to share every day at least 10 different universities in Asia Pacific, all of our contents, and many universities, think tank, governments, policymaker, corporations, they are joining with World Talent Economy Forum initiative. This is our objective. We want to make a meaningful and knowledge-based ecosystem, and we are doing hard work day and night with our teams. And I can remember when I started, Dr. Eric Du said, let's start. So we just start. We do not have too much of plan, too much of blueprint, too much of things. We just start with our team. Yes, we are step by step, we are getting very good result. And I want to give thanks to all of our speakers, those who support our World Talent Economy Forum. We have another actually conference. Even in this June, we want to arrange a big conference with International Islamic University. We want to invite all of our speakers, those who contribute for World Talent Economy Forums. And hopefully it will be one of the biggest conference in Asia Pacific. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks, as I have to start another sessions with US Chamber of Commerce after 10 minutes. They're actually waiting. I'm sorry about that, but I'm sure next week, if you have time, we can arrange startup and innovation. It's really, really excellent sessions. I'm sure our youth community will got a lot of guideline, and especially your mentorship. We are developing School of Talent Economy. We are offering the like innovation labs. So hopefully our mentors, those who are right now join in World Talent Economy forums, they will support our youth communities. I want to start with this concluding remarks. I want few sentences from our speakers. First Professor Donald, then Edward, then Professor David, Mr. Jamie, then Dr. Eric, and finally Dr. Babar Afzal. Professor Donald.
Remember that innovation and creativity are something that people say about you and not something that you say about yourself. So a lot of times you can just go and do whatever it is that's needed to do, and then everybody's going to turn around and go, wow, that was really creative. So innovation and creativity probably aren't a useful end in themselves. And what I always get back to is I'm an amateur musician, and I love Duke Ellington, who is probably one of the greatest composers in America ever. And he wrote 3,000 songs. Think about that. 50 of them are some of the greatest songs ever written in America, and 2,950 of them are forgotten. So a lot of times there's been studies of creativity, and the people who are most creative do the most things. So don't just do it. Just like Sharish was just saying, they just did it. And that's what you have to do. Go for it. And,
yes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Yes, Professor Edward.
I'll just say we pretty much covered everything here. And I'd say listen to what my colleagues here have said. I would just say be an individualist. Follow your own vision, celebrate your own achievements. But as James has said, be self-confident, but don't be arrogant, be self-reflective. It starts with you, okay? It starts with you as the individual, and then that is going to make you, hopefully in the long run, successful in startups and in your own life. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Professor David.
Yes, thank you, Sharif. Another excellent show as always. I want to end as I begin by reminding everybody that innovation and entrepreneurship is humanity's role in the future. Humanity's changing and improving future. Take your future into your own hands. Don't leave it to somebody else. Provide public examples of your value as you educate yourself and as you expand out into the world. Bring others into your circle and take them with you on your journey. Do something. Contribute to humanity's changing and improving and expanding future, and yours will do the same.
Thank you. Mr. Jem Eid.
Yes, thank you, Sharif, once again for a wonderful show and an opportunity for me to speak. I wanted to reinforce the idea that don't wait to be taught. Teach yourself. This is something that's everyone has a responsibility and a duty to do. Teach yourself. I had to rely on books. Now we have the internet. There's no reason why you don't teach yourself what you need to learn. And I think that the idea of the walls that are between us, I want to stress this, that our job, the pace of technology innovation has always been there. Fire, tools, motor vehicles, but the pace has changed. It's accelerated. So, you can't wait. You must act. Action is going to be the key. If you wait, you're just another brick in the wall. And we want to tear down these walls. If you're not tearing down the walls, if you're trying to build them up, or if you're just another brick in them, get out of the way, because I'm changing the world and I want everyone else to think like I do. In this case, change the world. And you start with yourself first.
Thank you.
Then your community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Eric.
Yes, again, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this talk here. I think one of the things we can, what I see from having listened to everyone here is there's one key takeaway that I think that everyone can appreciate, and that is to apply the scientific method. I think every one of us are talking about, innovating and changing and understanding and all that. All that distills down to basically the scientific method is you hypothesize something. Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Whatever. You test it. And if it fails, you adjust and you make changes. And then you update your hypothesis. You test it. If it works, then keep doing it. But if it doesn't work, you make changes. And of course, if it works, it doesn't work forever. Okay, I mean, laws of gravitation kind of works for a long time. It works forever. But a lot of the things that we do hypothetically for things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, those are solutions that work for a short time. Actually, I'm actually wrong. I just make a big mistake. The law of gravitation that Newton created does not work, right? We know it doesn't work because Einstein's laws of theories of gravitation has usurped that and has shown that Newton's laws of gravitation, the inverse square law, is actually wrong. It actually doesn't work, doesn't apply when you're close to some massive objects and so forth, black holes and things like that. So, and Newton's laws was only 300-400 years old, right? So things change, and you have to keep changing with it. And the way you learn how to change is applying the scientific method. You make the hypothesis, you do the test, you evaluate the test, and then change your hypothesis. Don't change the test, okay? Because then you're cheating to try to conform to your hypothesis. That's not the way to do it. You change your hypothesis based on what you're testing. Of course, like what everyone else also say, asking the right question. Asking the right question is creating the right test, right? If you ask the wrong question, you're creating the wrong test, and you may ace that test, but it has no application to what you're trying to do. So, being a good scientist is to have good questions.
Thank you, Dr. Babur Afzal. So yes, your concluding remarks. We have only few minutes. Thank you for today.
30 seconds. So what I'm saying is, I think for everyone and for the viewers, I think the youngsters, I think there's only one thing, and we spoke about Edison quite a bit in some of the speakers spoke about Edison. I think there's a very nice quote from Edison. I would like to end this session with it, is that there is a better way to do things. Find it. That's it.
Thank you. It's really great session. Hopefully next week we can arrange another session on startup and innovations, and definitely we need your support, because without speakers we cannot move forward. And I'm sure our students learn a lot from today's session. Thank you for joining today's sessions, and it's really great session for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you everyone.
Thank you,
sir.